Question number 6 of the PhilNITS FE afternoon portion of the exam. Question number 6 is compulsory, which means we have to answer it. For this question, we'll focus first on sub-question number 1. Here we are being asked to fill in the blank. Actually, we got 2 blanks for this sub-question number 1. And if we look at the details, we have here a pseudocode telling us that inside the for loop, what additional code are we supposed to add? Remember that a for loop iterates through each and every portion of the code inside it. And in this case, it first says that we'll add or we'll assign 0 to the value I, which is a container or a variable. And at the end, we will need to add a +1 to it. We do this until we reach the result where we don't satisfy the condition, this part anymore. For example, the value of I becomes 10. So we do this from 0 to 9. And we need to know what would be the correct code to put for the blanks A here and then A there. Okay, now if we read the description for step 1, we find here the sentence saying count the number of occurrences of each data value in an input sequence. When I read this the first time, I needed to know what data value meant. And if we look somewhere up above it, remember we're doing this counting, which is a counting sort algorithm or a set of instructions for the computer to do. And it says here that the data value could range from 0 to a larger number, and they're supposed to be non-negative integers. And this could be used for something like exam scores. And I think the exam score really helped me find out what is the value that we are attempting to look for, because we need to count how many times that value appears. Again, we have here exam scores saying that the range is between 0 and 10. Now the input here, we find that the score is also put in an array, which is a container of containers, where for the first container, which starts at 0, that's why it's container 0, it has the value of 7. The next one, container 1, has the value of 8, and then the next container, container 2, has the value of 5. I noticed that for certain containers like 0 and 9, their values, the scores, are the same. So that means there could be exam scores that are the same. And I think, again, the exam score should help us understand better what the numbers are supposed to mean. Now, if we go to the program, we have here the same set of containers put in pseudocode. And I think this should be helpful in a sense, but in my case, when I was answering this, I think I focused more on the other portions of the question. Although, again, we have here these things to help us understand that what we're adding would be the code inside the for loop. Also, the count is another container of containers whose initial values would be set to 0. And once we find, for example, 7 here, then we add a 1 to the container for 7. If we see another 7, then the value increases by 1. We know that it increases by 1 because if we look at the for loop for step 1, there's a plus 1 here. When I was answering this also, I was thinking that maybe it could be this one. Count, bracket, score, bracket I, bracket -1, then closing bracket. But turns out it's not in the choice. It's not in the set of choices at all. And the reason why I thought about this is because, well, the score could be 10. So if the score could be 10, then wouldn't be it superfluous, excess of what the count container could hold? Because the count container, I thought, could only reach up to a maximum of 9, from 0 to 9. And the score we know could be 10 if we got a perfect score. And so I thought that maybe there should be a -1 there. But it turns out, if we look again at the description, turns out that lo and behold, the count could reach 11. The number of containers in the count is set to 11. So what I was thinking previously is already figured out. Therefore, if we're going with this as the best answer, we need to explain how I arrived with count, bracket, score, bracket I, bracket, bracket. Okay, remember that if we're starting from score, the value of I starts from 0 until we reach 9. Because once we reach 10 in the count inside this for loop, we stop. Okay, so we go to the diagram. We start off first with 0, and we find that the value for container 0 is 7. That's why when 7 is the value for this part, count would have as its input 7, which means that we are going for container 7 of container count. Remember, count is an array, which is a container of containers. What that means is, if the container that we're talking about is 7 for count, then we need to add a 1 there, because currently its value is 0, so it would have a 1. Remember, we're starting first with score container 0, and we find that the value is 7. From 7, we go to the container count, and then we need to go to the 7th container of count, and that's why from here we add a 1 to signify that it occurred. We found this score in the score container, and we're adding that observation with a 1 here to the count container. And if we go to the code here, initially again it's 0, but this will be from 0, this will be 1. Okay? And we go to the next one, score. If the container 1 for score is opened, we find 8 as the value, then count. We go to the 8th container of count and we add a 1. Same with this one, we got a 1 here. Okay, and then let me see if I'm getting it right. 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I think this pertains to this, supposedly, because we're starting with 0. Okay, and then we go through each of the scores until we reach the 9th, because once we reach 10 we stop, and because we find 7 again, the 7 here we have to do a +1, which makes it 0, and this one would also be a +1. That's why it becomes 2. Therefore, the best answer should have count, bracket, score, bracket I, bracket, bracket, and that should be letter D.